Hi, friends. Welcome to today's episode of We Are Marketing Happy, a healthcare marketing podcast. I'm Jenny Bristow. I am the CEO and owner of Hedy and Hopp. We're a healthcare marketing agency. And I am so excited today to have our very own Director of Digital Activation, Lindsey Brown, on. Welcome, Lindsey.
Hey, Jenny. It's good to be back.
So I am excited today to chat with you a little bit about the patient or user journey. As you know, we do both patient activation as well as HCP marketing. So it can be patient or user. And we're not going to talk so much today about the strategy of developing and like understanding the patient journey. Let's talk more about the activation of the journey. So first of all, I'd love for you to give a high level explanation of what a journey is.
Yeah. At a very high level, what we're talking about is essentially a user's decision-making journey. So what really are the steps and the activities and the thought process that goes in your target audience to get to a decision about choosing your product or signing up for something that you want them to sign up for, booking an appointment, anything like that. What is that decision-making process?
Yeah. And it's usually humans are not linear,
No,
right?
we're not.
Yeah.
As a planner, I wish that our audiences could just be like, you're going to start here and then you do this and then you do this and follow this beautiful linear path. But life is messier than that. Life is more fluid than that. And so what's really important to think about when you are building that journey is you almost have to think about it in a linear sense and just know when you get to the activation point that your audience isn't going to follow the exact steps that you laid out. But as a marketer and as a planner, you have to understand what are the thought processes that go on to get someone through those stages so that your marketing initiatives, your messaging, what you're driving them to do are meeting them where they are. That whole meet your audience where they are, meet your patients where they are. It's really about knowing what those key points are in the general journey and making sure you've got messaging and tactics there ready to grab those patients when they're ready.
Yeah, that's very helpful to understand. I was talking to a senior marketer yesterday. It's actually a person who's going to be a guest on the podcast in a few weeks. And one of the things that she was talking about is how difficult it can be for people, junior marketers in particular. So clearly not you, but new folks that come in that are trained specifically on one marketing tactic, let's say paid media, for them to really understand how to infuse the brand through all of the different steps of the activation journey. So talk to me about like if as you're running the activation team, what are some key components or some key things that you need strategy or the brand team or whatever to give to you so that you can make sure that all of the people throughout the process activate the brand in the correct way?
Yes. So one of the reasons that patient journey or that user journey is so critical is that it really helps align all of your teams on the same page for what you're trying to do. Even junior marketers are thinking really creatively about how to execute campaigns in their craft, in their subject matter expertise. So even our paid media leads, we've got someone that's really specific in social media and those platforms in and out, whereas our paid media lead knows about multiples. And so they're thinking together, how do we make our media tactics work together? And then how does that translate into how we're measuring that across each of those messages and across each of those stages with our analytics team? So there's a lot to think about and making sure that all of your teams understand that patient journey. Again, knowing it's not linear, knowing they kind of bounce back and forth, or they may not take as long on a certain stage as you thought they might, and they'll move really quickly, or maybe they'll take a little bit longer. If your whole team understands your end goal, the whole team understands what you're trying to achieve, and if they understand those key things that the audience needs to make informed decisions, then let them be a little bit creative and let them help come up with the best way to execute that within their subject matter expertise.
Yeah, that's an excellent point because I think it is, first of all, at this point in marketing, it is impossible to understand all the variables at each level of activation because it's so specialized. It's not like it was 5 or 10 years ago where you could be a generalist and understand the details of SEO or the details of paid or whatever to the level of granularity like now. It's impossible to do that. So that's a great point just to empower people to bring it
And I
alive.
think, especially when we're thinking about, engaging audiences for the future, Your more junior level marketers are actually the ones using a lot of these platforms. And they're the ones that really understand how users engage with them and what is going to work. So giving them the freedom to be creative and think of some new ways to engage that audience is really critical. But it's hard for them to do that if they're just being directed on, this is what I want you to do. More of like, let's guide them on the best way to think about something and the best way to execute, again, with their expertise in mind.
Yeah. And with the brand framework clearly laid out, right? Something that you and your team are really good at is making sure like the messaging for the brand, the visuals for the brand, all of that is really clearly defined, because then those junior people can take it and run with it because they've been given frameworks of messaging and visuals to stay within.
Yeah, the worst thing you can give a creative individual is to put them in a box. So we want to try and give them some guardrails, right? Because there are things that we have to adhere to in terms of brand standards, how the brand wants to show up, where they need to show up, where their audience is. But, making sure that we're not limiting our creative minds in terms of how they execute and kind of giving them the ability to come up with those new unique ways for you as a brand to show up.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk a little bit about the digital front door and that whole phrase. In healthcare, it has been such a hot phrase, but I also think it's really interesting because none of these individual tactics are new within the digital front door. It's just now they're being packaged up as a nice little terminology for how patients are accessing care. So we're thinking about zero-click conversions, right? Whenever people go and they type in therapist near me, and then they just see on the Google My Business and they click to call. We're talking about and thinking about find a doctor tools or schedule appointment tools. So with all of these different things in mind, as you're thinking about activating the patient or the user journey, how does your team really understand, like you said before, like what parts maybe you thought patients would use really heavily, but maybe they're not using it as much as you thought, or something that you thought maybe wouldn't be really important in their journey ends up being more important? How do you measure all of that and then kind of pivot as those data points come in?
Yeah, so great question, because in order to activate that journey and to really understand how users are moving through it, it starts with your measurement plan at the very beginning. So again, you've got your team in the room, you're explaining to them like what that patient journey looks like. And now your analytics team has the ability to think about, all right, well, if our objective in this initial stage is to build awareness, what are some ways that we can measure awareness? And then how do we build in the tactics and deliver those tactics with that end goal in mind? So making sure that you've got a strong measurement plan to understand like where your patients are coming from, understand where your patients are looking or browsing on the web and that kind of thing. These are all important things to make sure you are showing up in the right way. So back to that awareness example, it's not necessarily where you're going to have a lot of search terms, or you may not even have emails that really get deployed during that stage because they're in the information gathering stage. You're trying to show up in unexpected ways. So this is where your social media will really come into play. This is where, programmatic, if you can use that, will come into play, those kinds of things. And as you get a little bit further down the funnel in that consideration, that's where, maybe deeper messages start to come in, where you're asking them to fill out a form, or you're asking them to download something, or asking them to book an appointment. From a marketing perspective, there are a lot of things that we have to think about, things that are pushing our audience to your platform and things that are pulling them as well. So using things like Google My Business, if you're a regional healthcare provider, is really important because that's where people are going to start looking. They're going to look in Google, what's near me, what's the most convenient. But to even consider clicking on your Google My Business, they may need to know who you are already, which is why those other tactics are really important to make sure that you're getting your brand out there, and that when they are ready to sort of take that next step, that you're the ones that they're thinking of.
So that was such a clear explanation. I appreciate that. And I know a lot of people kind of get stuck in their own head when they're trying to figure out all the different pieces and how they work together. So thank you. One thing I'd love to talk about is attribution, because with all of the stuff with HIPAA and privacy, a lot of providers have taken the super conservative path of simply stripping everything from all their analytics from their digital platforms. And we have so many episodes about why you don't have to do that and how there are other ways that you can still implement tracking in a HIPAA safe way. I will link to them in the notes. We're not going to go into that here. So let's imagine that somebody's already fixed it. Their tracking is HIPAA compliant. attribution modeling. I know our team looks at quite a few different attribution models, whether it's first click, last click, linear, as they're going through. One thing that I know that we've talked about a lot, though, is like not overthinking it, because sometimes marketers can get so in their head about one model versus another model. Talk a little bit about whenever you're going through and doing executive summaries for our clients about which tactic's working, what the user journey looks like. How do you think about that? How do you and our analytics team approach that?
So it goes back to what we are saying our goals are at every stage. So for example, if we take a traditional funnel, even though we know users don't necessarily always follow that funnel, but if you're thinking about awareness, what are some indicators that we are getting users more aware of your product? We can look at simple things like your branded search terms. Are those going up? Are they staying flat? We can look at things like impressions delivered, even though that's a tough metric to really prove. We can't prove that someone looked at the ad and ingested that ad, but we can say we were out in the market targeting your audience. And that's why it's more of an awareness level. But if we're trying to see how that then pushes audiences through to like the next stage, if your next stage is consideration, what are some of the metrics that show your audience is actually considering? So are they browsing multiple products? Are they going back and forth into your website? Are they looking at multiple pages? Things to that effect may tell us that they are in that consideration stage and then finally getting through to conversion. So what marketers can do is look in their analytics platforms to see where are people starting and ending. How do impressions then affect what your website sessions look like? How do those branded search terms affect what your website sessions look like, if that's where your conversion takes place on your website? And then how does that translate then into getting them to that final end goal of booking that appointment or whatever your conversion is? So it really goes back to what you are using to measure where an audience is at the various stages. Even if we can't get down to one, which we will not be able to do in this HIPAA compliant environment that we are in, again, unless you have deployed some very sophisticated analytics on your site, server side, you may not be able to get to one-to-one, but we can at least have a really good idea of what is driving those audiences so that we can optimize our media mix, we can optimize our channel mix as we sort of iterate moving forward and get more and more conversions down the line.
Yeah. And I think one thing that y'all typically do with clients during the measurement planning is you talk about attribution models up front. That way down the road, it doesn't end up becoming something that's shiny object, right?
Yeah.
Like I feel like every time a big article comes out about a different attribution model or some education about all the different attribution models, so many marketers' gut instincts are, am I missing something? Do I need to look at it through these different lenses? So that's, I feel like, a rabbit hole that is great to avoid by being strategic up front. That way, then you aren't continuously trying to pivot and really just confusing yourself throughout the activation process.
Yeah, it really is all about what are you trying to achieve at those stages and how are you getting people to that stage? And it doesn't have to be super sophisticated to get down to that level. You can, especially if you have a business model that you need to get down into the nitty gritty like that. Like there's multiple steps or it's a long process. But for the most part, we tend to be able to look at things at a higher level and really understand how we can pivot and move things forward.
That's awesome. Well, Lindsey, thank you so much for being on today. It was really great chatting about patient and user journeys with you. Well, links to Lindsey's LinkedIn in the bio of the podcast. I'm also going to link to the different analytics episodes that we have done recently, because if you're thinking about your patient journey or user journey and saying, I don't have any of this data anymore because we cut everything off, go back and listen to those episodes. There are solutions that are available. So until next time, thank you so much for tuning in. Take care.